and welcome to our latest session of Deininger Leadership Talk Series. I'm Manish Varghese, and I head the India business of our firm, Deininger Consulting, which is a global executive search and leadership consulting firm headquartered out of Frankfurt, Germany. Today, we have with us Mr. Amit Narayan, who is a partner at Controlled Risks. A quick introduction to Amit for our viewers. Amit has over 2 decades of experience with helping clients on political and regulatory risk, pre-investment risk, public policy, labor disputes, stakeholder mapping, and crisis management. Presently, Amit is a partner at Controlled Risks and leads their India and South Asia business. Controlled Risk is a specialist global risk consultancy which helps their clients to build secure, compliant, and resilient organizations. Amit joined Controlled Risk in 2018 from Edelman, India, where he served as Executive Vice President and National Reputation Lead. Prior to joining Edelman, he managed external communications in Asia Pacific region for Vodafone Group's Enterprise Business Unit. He also served as the business manager to the APAC MD of this business unit. Earlier, he has held APAC level strategy, marketing, and communications roles with companies such as the Walt Disney Company and Cable and Wireless. Amit, I'm very delighted that you could join us today. Many thanks and a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you for a fulsome welcome as well. Appreciate being here.
Great. As you're aware, we are here today to have a discussion on the subject of leadership resilience. And I would like to kick off this discussion by referring to a simple yet a powerful quote from J.K. Rowling, who said, "Rock bottom is the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." I think that speaks volumes of how resilient she was and why she's such an inspiration to so many people around the world. With that, I would like to open up the discussion and ask you, what does resilience mean to you in the context of leadership?
Yeah, and well done on quoting J.K. Rowling. I think she's written some of the most quotable text in recent years, but also forms a very good example of both how we can build on from where we are, and also offers, in some senses, a little bit of a cautionary tale on what we could do better. And maybe we can get to that in a bit. But I mean, fundamentally, I think resilience, to me, especially in the current context, starts from that rock bottom that J.K. Rowling mentions. A lot of the companies, over 90% of the clients that we speak to or have spoken with in the last 18 months, had a very different perspective on what it meant to be resilient till March 2020. When the pandemic hit most parts of the world.
Yeah.
And we have, over the last 18 months, both with the benefit of hindsight, but also with respect to the work that we've done as corporations, even as governments, come up with new and rather more significant and deeper meaning of resilience. And to me, fundamentally, resilience is about 4 things. One is about readiness. How ready are you with respect to being able to account for and ensure that you can respond effectively to a crisis that happens? How easily can you recover from it? There's a disruption. What does it mean time to recovery? And the most important aspect of resilience is about being able to revel in it a bit so that you come out and emerge from it stronger.
Yeah.
Okay? And let me try and explain why the reveling piece is the most important bit about resilience. We've spoken about the kind of readiness, response, and recovery phases in both technical business continuity terms as well as desirable strategic terms for many, many years now, many decades now. In fact, organizations form a norm over periods of time. But I think what's different with here and now is about how many companies are saying, how do I emerge stronger from this crisis? And that is where business continuity becomes business resilience. And that's where leadership continuity and leadership competence becomes leadership resilience.
Interesting.
Okay? We try to speak about this in kind of Greek mythology terms, just to try and explain it.
Right.
Because narratives work well, right, with clients. Most organizations were between a resilience pendulum that stretches from fragile to resilient to anti-fragile. Okay, fragile is typically the sword of Damocles. It's proverbially hanging over your head.
Right.
It's very kind of unstable. Any break in norm kind of unleashes it, and the thin thread that holds it over your neck breaks, and effectively makes organizations that are kind of in the mold and not quite ready for disruption. We then come to resilience, which we refer to a little bit more in the kind of phoenix terms. Right. You burn and you emerge from the ashes like the phoenix. But what many of us also realize is that phoenix actually burns as the phoenix. Again, actually, J.K. Rowling is a great example. Dumbledore's phoenix kind of burns and then re-emerges as the same phoenix. And that's what organizations thought continuity was all about. How do you, even if you are kind of, in the pitch and toss, lose what you have? How do you re-emerge back as what you were? That's not anymore continuity or desirable state. The desirable state is actually to go beyond the resilient into what is more anti-fragile space. And I refer to that as the kind of hydra space, the kind of multi-headed monster that again kind of most of us realizes as being a kind of almost a de facto representative of problems that don't go away, but has a surprisingly positive aspect to it as well, about how when you cut ahead, to new heads emerge and actually enable you as a result of disruption to create new business lines, new ways of working, new partnerships, new ways of hiring and keeping employees that actually help you emerge stronger, not just from the phoenix state, but from that phoenix into the hydra state, where you emerge stronger. So that is what, I would say resilience looks like in today's day.
And that's a very interesting take, because, and like you said, probably the definition of how leadership resilience has also evolved over times is what you're probably alluding to. I mean, it's no longer about, coming back from a setback and, go back to your old form, but it's probably taking a step further and saying, how can you evolve into a better organization, better leader, and what else can you do to emerge stronger than before? Very interesting take on that. My next question is more about how to build leadership resilience, and if in your opinion, Amit, you see self-reflection and self-awareness as critical facets of that, and how do you overcome the fear of being judged for saying or even admitting that I don't know? I mean, and people fear, when you are at a leadership role, you're scared to say that you don't know. You want to, feel and say that you know it all. How do you overcome that?
It's an interesting question, and you kind of use two words, phrases rather, self-reflection and self-awareness. And to me, actually, they are different phrases. I wouldn't so far as call them two sides of a coin, but they're certainly different. Okay? And let me try and explain why I think self-awareness and self-reflection are two different things.
Right.
I'll probably try and use an example. Okay, so self-reflection is very personal. It's about, how I look inside myself and evaluate my strengths, weaknesses, behaviors, response to a particular situation. If I take an example, Virat Kohli, for watchers of Indian cricket, is a very different kind of captain to MS Dhoni,
True.
the person he took over the captaincy from. And self-reflection is about figuring out what works for you. Okay? And it's different for different leaders. So therefore, Virat Kohli has the license to be a different kind of leader to MS Dhoni, because he self-reflects and says, okay, this is me. I'm going to be my kind of captain. I'm going to be true to myself. And that's very important. Okay, in a leader as well. It's very important for them to understand that just because you've taken over from a very successful leader or someone who has kudos and success at for work that she has done in the past or he has done in the past, doesn't necessarily mean that you just walk in their footsteps. It can be different depending on what you believe your leadership standards. Teams and companies respond to leaders who are in control. As long as, you can be your own leader, but you have to be in control. As long as you're seen to be in control, as a result of having self-reflected, that becomes somebody or something that people get aligned behind.
Yeah.
But control is only the second most important leadership trait in my book. Okay? The first is more about self-awareness, which is a very different construct to self-reflection. Self-awareness is about, and it's much more critical in today's day and age, it is about a rule book. It's not about who you are individually. It's about the leadership rule book. It's about leaders realizing that what they say matters, that there are guardrails within which they can behave, they can be, regardless of what kind of the personality they are, because that is what projects your personality out to the world, out to your team, out to your company, out to the world, and so on and so forth. To continue our cricketing analogy, both Kohli and Dhoni have to be similarly self-aware. Okay? So even though they can be different self-reflectively, they have to be similarly self-aware. It's about the impact of what you say. It's about what you do in public and in front of your team. It's about how you don't have any throwaway comments to make. You don't have backhanded quips to make. You don't at any point in time make statements that have no context or less than full context around them. That has always been true, okay? But it's more so now. Self-awareness is about that first quality of a great leader, which is judgment. So you may have great control and you might even be able to drive right results, but it's about having that judgment about how do I say, how do I appear, how do I come across. That today has become a very, very significant quality in a leader. And that's why I think self-awareness and self-reflection are two very different things. Now, to me, the kind of example of from personal life, an example of a leader who kind of did really well with respect to self-awareness and self-reflection. Actually, I have quite a few, but I wanted to kind of go back to the point that you raised, which is about kind of admitting to whether you don't know. We all went through a phase in the last 18 months where there was a lot of unpredictability, not just because of the epidemiological public health crisis, which was leading the world down a path that it has not gone for at least 100 years. And with all the kind of information overflow that comes with social media and better academic and empirical data available, a lot of the kind of work around science versus belief and faith and so on and so forth. I think fortunately we evolved and devolved into a world where leaders had the opportunity to kind of step in and lead, but also had the ability to form teams around themselves, made of experts, people who could give them contextual, fact-based and perception-based insight that allowed them to present themselves as leaders and be people who would take the best possible decision given the information that they have at hand. And I think that's the kind of leader that's emerging today. I'll stop there and see if you have any questions, but I'm happy to, kind of.
No, I think you've fairly well elaborated on those two aspects, and I do like the comparison that you made about those two elements within the resilience, about self-reflection and self-awareness, and also kind of going back to the equilibrium that you mentioned about from fragile to resilience to anti-fragile. I do think still somewhere to a greater extent, a lot of people still relate to resilience as a matter of coping and survival, right? But I think there is a very strong element which you're constantly alluding to, is that it is also about seizing the opportunities to grow in the face of adversity. How do you think leaders and organizations can move on that continuum from a survival mindset to a growth mindset when you're faced with adverse, uncertain, unprecedented business environments?
I would say that the survival mindset and the growth mindset have to interoperate, have to exist at the same time. It's not my phrase, but maybe McKinsey that said it. Leaders are now required to have a telescope and a microscope. Okay. And by that, obviously, they're saying that you need to have long-term coherent vision of where the company is going, where the world is going, where the industry is going, where clients are going, and therefore you. But also the kind of very significant discipline to focus on the minutiae, making sure that you are being able to kind of figure out what the short-term fixes are, and that they are at hand, and they're able to you're able to kind of resolve matters for people very quickly. Okay, and that actually goes back to the point that you asked earlier, which is about kind of the leader. My sense is that two things have kind of happened. One, an openness among leaders as well, and we encourage it, and we say so. If you don't know, just say so, because what you have in front of you or listening to you from across the screen are people who are irreverent, high-performing, aspirational, confident as a workforce, very comfortable in their own skin. They have been thrown into a challenge where they've had to go from an office environment to a home working environment, and we've reveled in more often than not. We've kind of, despite all the personal challenges, public health challenges, we've all had people who've suffered. We've kind of done the best of it. Even manufacturing company CEOs say, this hasn't been all bad, even though my companies, especially in Q1 of 2021, where people had to shut down factories, restart them, etc. It wasn't all bad. They used the opportunity to kind of fix things that were important, but were never urgent, and so on and so forth. And so, being able to say candidly to your workforce, I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Here is my plan. And tell them what it is that you're going to be doing in finding that way. Ask them what it is that, if they have any ideas, but also tell them who are the team members that you're putting in place to kind of find those ideas. Where are we going to get the resources to fix that problem? Presenting a solution, as ever. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Presenting a solution is very important. As long as you can do that, you are still not going to lose your position as a leader, I believe. And frankly, some of the most remarkable leaders I've worked with, and I think it's kind of fair to cite a few examples from my own life. I mean, when I first joined Vodafone in 2011, I joined in March of 2011. And one of the first things that happened, I joined in Hong Kong. One of the first things that happened was the March 2011 tsunami in Japan, which led to the meltdown of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor. And it led to a lot of worry, of course, coming as it did, 7 years, I think, after the Banda Aceh tsunami, and people had kind of this sense of large-scale disruption. But the issue there was actually about nuclear fallout. And, we were all kind of learning this new word called microsieverts, a terrible, terrifying word about how radiation, ambient radiation was kind of going to make life in the metropolitan area of Tokyo impossible. And we obviously had a lot of colleagues there. And I remember joining this company, and I was working with a mentor who I had great respect for, a man called Nick Lambert. He effectively took it upon himself to say, no, I am going to make sure that our colleagues feel that they are being well served. And within a month of that disaster, Nick made what is a very significant 2-day trip to Tokyo to go and meet these colleagues. Oh. And they were amazed that here was this man based in Singapore, who was their leader, who came, took it upon himself to kind of spend those 2 days. Japan was open for business. If I don't know if you remember, but Japan was open for business within kind of 2 or 3 days. And the electricity company and everybody else said, look, no problem, electricity is being supplied. But everybody, international press, Japanese press, was worried about radiation, ambient radiation. And our leader kind of goes into Tokyo, spends 2 days not with clients as he usually did, but with his colleagues, with our colleagues, and said, we are with you. And, the difference that makes to people's perceptions of what leadership is amazing. He left the business in 2015, I think. But even when he did, those 2 days he spent in Tokyo were quoted, not just by people in the Tokyo office then, but by others who were really truly amazed about how a leader kind of walks the talk. And I think those are all the kind of more significant aspects, if you will, of kind of leadership and how that comes through. When we talk about the kind of growth mindset and survival mindset, it's about kind of finding the growth mindset within, what was clearly a survival kind of situation at that moment in time.
That brings me to my one of my final questions, Amit. And when we look around ourselves and we talk about work pressure, work stress, I see that as being two parts. There is this self-imposed stress, and there is also the externally induced stress, right?
Yeah.
And which is to say that you, as leaders, you're expected to constantly and consistently perform as if there is no real room for failure. But do you think that the world around us is evolving and that there is a greater level of acceptance towards our leaders' shortcomings, or to accept the fact they may also fail sometimes? Or do you think that there is this still the superhero image that kind of prevails, where leaders are expected to be superheroes and not fail?
I kind of look at it differently, Manish. There have been a lot of instances. So I don't think there is a genuine belief that a CEO or a leader has to be a superhero. But if you kind of put yourself up at that level, then you had better live up to it. And you talk about kind of self-imposed, then I call them self-inflicted hurts, wounds. I think genuinely the concept of a superhero CEO got kind of consigned to the recycling bin at least a decade. I would say around the 2008 global financial crisis, where the kind of know-it-all CEO, if that's a kind of aphorism. Because ironically, it was the democratization of knowledge and opinion brought about by the World Wide Web and social media, as well as the kind of first digital natives joining the workforce that laid that model to rest, because you genuinely couldn't be across everything. So you needed competent leaders in the second levels. And so, hyper-specialism was important. Business models were more complicated. The ways of doing business became more complicated. Globalization was no longer the ticket to glory. Globalization has had kind of been buffeted very badly since 2008 for many, many different reasons. Regulations changed, stakeholders changed, governments itself have realized that they have a role to play, etc. I think the most important thing I would say, for a CEO is about being humble and having the ability to step back. Again, when we spoke about letting the interaction sustain, step back and have a sense of balance around what it is that they can genuinely contribute to in a discussion. Not necessarily be the final word, on the matter. Letting a situation kind of be governed and ruled by people who may at that point in time know better than he does or she does. I think for me, and I'd like to close on this, the word of the pandemic was mindfulness. Okay? Being mindful fundamentally starts with self-awareness, and we've spoken about this a little bit. It extends a little bit to kind of understanding and gaining new perspectives. It goes to accepting the unexpected, the agility and the flexibility required, about driving new ways of learning, new ways of hiring, new ways of going to market, and having the openness to have that outside-in perspective. What's changing around me? How do I got to being a CEO, or I've been a CEO for 10 years, but I do realize that the world has changed around me. And, and how do I kind of make new decisions for, this world that we are now having to, live and thrive in. And I think that really genuinely requires mindfulness. And I think that's the most important resilient quality for resilience in a leader.
Wonderful, and thank you so much for so aptly summarizing it. And I'll remember that that's the word of the pandemic, mindfulness
for me.
But thank you so much, Amit. I mean, it's been a fascinating session. Very interesting listening into the perspectives. Be it about the resilience equilibrium, or how you define self-reflection and self-awareness. The fact that it's about being in control and having the judgment. And I mean, so many interesting perspectives that came out through our discussion today. And I'm sure that people are going to enjoy listening into this and watching this session. So many thanks for making the time, much appreciated. And I look forward to being in touch.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate you reaching out.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.